Welcome back to DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, and the off-season is now upon us. After 6 months of race week after race week of action to review during the season, we are now into the off-season stage. 6 months of trying to find content of various different sorts. It can always be entertaining. There's always plenty of weird and wacky episodes during off-season, but don't worry, this one is one of our more traditional episodes, and as we do each year, the week after the IndyCar season ends is our official season review, which we're going to do today. If you haven't caught last week's episode, a lot has gone on since our season review at Nashville. We had a bonus episode reviewing the driver market after Will Powers moved to Andretti, after departure to Formula 2, as well as the new IndyCar race in Markham next year. The following day, I think it was, on Friday, we had an exclusive with the Indy Next champion, Dennis Hauger, about his ambitions of stepping up to IndyCar in 2026. So give both those episodes a listen if you haven't already. It's been an action-packed week for us. So hopefully from here on in, it'll be calmer waters, but we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, we're here for the season review. Myself and Archie are joined by our very good friend of the show, James Scott. James, welcome back. It's been a while, but fantastic to have you back on.
Yeah, I mean, not since the Indy 500 win here. A lot has changed. We've had multiple race winners, which we could barely say at the Indy 500. So yeah, good to be back.
The Indy 500 one went well, didn't it? We ended up having to record an extra bit because Ericsson got disqualified, but not disqualified.
That happened about 4 weeks in a row, didn't it? They kept on having penalties post-race. Like, oh, here we go again. It's on the 10-minute
that was
weird to the end. But as we always do, we have devised ourselves 8 categories to discuss, and we're going to go over these 8 categories. We've all got our own driver or team or thought for each category, and we'll review these key topics across the course of the 2025 season. Now, as we always do, we'll start off with the driver of the year. Now, this had just have a slight caveat because, well, if your answer isn't Alex Palou, you're a bit insane, to be completely honest. You've not been watching the same season as we have. And following that, we kind of all unanimously agree, well, if it's not Alex Palou, it's going to be Pato O'Ward. So this is going to actually be the award for the 3rd best driver of the year, but we'll say best driver of the year with an asterisk, and we'll leave it at that. But we'll start off with Alex Palou. It is only right that we do mention him. It'd be a bit unfair to gloss over him just because he's been so good this season. And I mean, there's nothing really else to say apart from it's been such a generational season. I mean, he's run so many races. Me and Archie, every podcast episode had about a 10-minute segment on him. And as I said, it has been such a generational year. I mean, it's hard to break IndyCar records because they always date back to 1956, and where the numbers are ridiculous because they're all farmers. So you can't really break IndyCar records, but modern day records, Palou certainly smashed them all. I mean, winning a title for 2 races to go hadn't been done in over 20 years. Winning 8 races in the season is unprecedented numbers. He finished in the top 2. I think was in 12 of the 17 races, podiums in all but 4. Top 10 in all but 2. He qualified, I think, in the top 10 in every single race this year. I mean, it was about as good of a motorsport season as you'll see anywhere, really. And all his shortcomings in previous years, short ovals, managing traffic on ovals, qualifying, none of them were his weak points anymore. He sorted all of them and still kept up his absolutely impenetrable form on road courses, which has always been a speciality. He won the road course championship by a country mile, and he won the oval championship for somebody who'd never won an oval race before this year and was never considered a strong oval racer. I mean, his points gap, I think, was almost 200 points by end of the standings, which is absolutely ludicrous. It was a season which will go down in the history books for a very, very long time, and possibly the greatest individual season that we have seen in a very, very long time. And a lot of credit has to go to Alex Palou, because we're going to remember 2025 in 10 years' time as the year that Alex Palou absolutely swept the field.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably the biggest credit you can give him is that we've spoken about him so much, it's hard not to feel like we're repeating things. But I think the best way I can put it is something I've kind of been saying all year, that obviously IndyCar's built its name for being so competitive and being so unpredictable, and Palou has brought this air of predictability, this air of inevitability. And I know people critique it for being boring, but I think we just cannot say enough how rare what he's doing is. Like, he's become one of only 6 4-time champions in the history of IndyCar, one of only 4 drivers to three-peat as well. There's only 2 drivers now who have more championships than he does. And I mean, on top of that, he won the Indy 500, which I guess just crowns it for once and for all as one of the all-time great seasons. That was legacy defining. I mean, he said beforehand, didn't he, that his career would not be a success if he did not win the 500. Goes and absolutely smashes it. I mean, it would have felt wrong if he left the season and hadn't won the 500 in many ways. And yeah, now that's 4 titles in 5 years with Ganassi. He's only been in IndyCar for 6 years. He's only 28 years old. I think he's not even had a century of races yet. Like, he's toppling records, and he says that he doesn't really he's not really record driven, but he's kind of just doing it anyway. And I almost think like what makes this so cool to see is that Hello and the number 10 team, which is obviously such a legendary combination, they're doing all this while just seeming to have the time of their lives. Like, they're not putting pressure on themselves, and they're just loving every moment of the success. And yeah, I think just to kind of lay bare how impressive the season is. Like, okay, he fell short of getting the record of 10 wins, but only 3 drivers have ever managed more than 8 wins in a season. 13 podiums in 17 races. Again, only 4 individuals have done that in history. It's almost all the more memorable when you get a season like this because it is just so rare. And yeah, we've seen greatness unfold before our eyes in the last 6 months. It's been astonishing, and it's going to be fun to see people try and take the challenge to a guy who really doesn't seem to have any weaknesses anymore.
In 2023, Alex Palou didn't finish outside the top 8 once, and that was a remarkable feat. But this year has been basically even more impressive. He matched that stat, other than being taken out in Detroit and that strategic blunder that him and Dixon suffered in Toronto, which was just a failure, a rare failure from Chip Ganassi Racing to dial that in. But this time, he won 8 races in the process and was barely off the podium. It was quite simply remarkable. And in those first 6 races where he won 5 of them, the only time he didn't win, it was a runners-up spot. And it basically psychologically broke the rest of the field. No one could get anywhere near that. And I mean, the championship was essentially over 3 rounds in. Which for IndyCar, which Archie, as you say, prides itself on unpredictability, is something, quite remarkable. And then after those 2 rounds, to then go back to back Barber, and then basically sweep the month of May. Obviously, not on the pole for the 500, but again, an air of inevitability that Palou whistled through and won that as well. And I mean, we won't remember the 2025 Indy 500 for much more than Palou cementing his legacy as a true IndyCar great, finally winning the Indy 500 and then going on to secure a 4th championship. But it was just quite simply remarkable that every week he just refused to be beaten. And then when he cracked the short ovals, and I mean, the pole in Milwaukee was sublime, and then the effort it took to overhaul him in Nashville and in Milwaukee for those efforts from Rasmussen and O'Ward, it just really kind of really puts into perspective just how strong he was, that these were some quite formidable drives, and they were what was needed to topple Alex Palou. It wasn't like Palou was finishing kind of consistently in the top 5 and grabbing just a couple of wins like he did last year. This year was sheer domination, and it was pretty remarkable to see.
I mean, just some other numbers as well. He took 6 poles this year. His previous tally in 5 years was 6. Like that just, I mean, shows this pure pace that he always regarded as, like, it doesn't feel fair saying it's a weakness, because it wasn't a weakness. It was just something that wasn't quite as incredible as the rest of the incredible stuff.
Okay, let's get on to Pato O'Ward as well very briefly, because his season is worthy of a mention. We sort of all unanimously agree he'd probably be the second best driver of the season, and much like Carl Kirkwood was for us mid-season. So this was a strange year for O'Ward, because he's a maker, and this year really wasn't that, but it was still his best year in IndyCar so far, which is a weird counter-argument, but it's very true. And I think McLaren, first of all, gave a package which was more consistent and more reliable, and there wasn't some, they were competing for victories one race, and the next race they were down to 17th with no real explanation. There wasn't that race-to-race inconsistency that's plagued them in previous years. And I'm sure we'll get to a bit later, but Christian Lundgaard really brought a challenge to O'Ward this season, which I really think made him raise his own game as well, to continue to prove that he is the top driver in that team. And I mean, it was an incredibly consistent year from O'Ward in so many different ways. He ended the year with 2 victories, obviously, which is still less than he had last season. But when you look at it in other ways, he had 6 podiums, which is a very high number. He had 10 top 5s, he had 12 top 10s, which is unmatched levels of consistency. And he was running in first pretty much, and both Portland and Nashville all had a very good chance of winning both Portland and Nashville, and lost up to 100 points on both those occasions there. So you look at those, could have been an opportunity for 2 more victories, certainly 2 more podiums. So O'Ward's level's really been raised this year, and we speak about somebody who can take it to below, and you already do look at O'Ward because he is unbelievable on ovals, and his road course form is improving. His consistency is undoubtedly improving as well, which was always his sort of weakness. He'd have sort of a rough run of races each season, 3-4 races in a row where he'd make mistakes, he'd make clumsy moves, which would just derail the course of the season. But there wasn't really any patch of the season where it was like that. It was just real amounts of consistency. I mean, he had 5 top 5s in a row, 6 and 7 races, and the 7th was Portland. So you look at that consistency, and that's something that we've never seen before from O'Ward. So I think just a really quietly impressive season where Palou took all the headlines week on week, but O'Ward was getting results even when that McLaren wasn't the quickest car on any given weekend, like Toronto, for example. That car wasn't the quickest, but he still did a very good job to bring that home to victory lane. Same as Iowa, to be honest. So a great year for O'Ward. I think a lot to build up for McLaren. And if anybody's going to take the fight to Palou, as I said, I think he's in the prime position to do that.
Yeah, I think we definitely saw a different version of O'Ward this season. I think it was confirmation that he is definitely a title-worthy driver. Like, I don't think there's been doubt about that in terms of his pace, but I think there's been doubt about it in terms of that consistency and that knitting it together across the course of a season. I know ultimately he finished 200 points behind Palou, but take away Portland, take away obviously the tyre failure in Nashville, he'd probably be closer to 100 points behind, which is obviously still a very big gap to make up. But I don't see Palou having quite as good a season as that. Like, it is obviously, as we've outlined, pretty abnormal. And I mean, he ended on 515 points O'Ward. Palou won the title last year with 544. So thinking realistically, O'Ward could have picked up even if he'd picked up 50 points from Portland and Nashville, he would have usurped Palou's tally from last year. He had the same amount of wins and podiums as Palou had last year with 2 and 6 respectively. So yeah, I think in most ordinary years, he would have been embroiled in the thick of a title fight. And the only reason he is not is because of how astonishing and legendary the driver ahead of him has been. And I think the team's had a massive leap forward. Like, you look at tracks like Toronto, like Portland, where they struggled in previous years, yet here you are, O'Ward's winning Toronto. They've not locked out the front. They kind of locked out the front row in Portland. Didn't obviously get to both start there, but a lot of this season just comes down to him neatening things up. Like, there were previous years where he was just making like far too many errors. Like, I think of Barber as a big one last year, where he was like, he crashed into Fittipaldi, he crashed into Porsche, and he was just kind of throwing results away. Whereas now he isn't having those sort of, at least this year, if he can continue it, he hasn't had those sort of barren patches, and this sort of reliability from him is what we haven't seen. And I know he's complained like he didn't feel like he was as quick in qualifying, but it doesn't really matter if things are better on Sunday, and it might be a slightly more boring version of O'Ward, but that kind of efficiency might be what it takes. Like, to finish 12 times in the top 7 this season, like 10 times in the top 5, that's unheard of from him. And it feels like they've really started to limit the errant weekends. Like, I think next year he has to get off to a better start, because that seems to be where he almost was put on the back foot from the beginning this season. But otherwise, it's been extremely strong, very impressive.
Yeah, you mentioned that points tally, and I'm finishing with over 500 points in IndyCar and still being so far off the championship leader. It's almost a disservice to how good O'Ward has been, because of the headlines have been all around Palou, and he's led a good number of laps this year. I mean, over 200 laps led, which again is dwarfed by the fact that Alex Palou led just around 800. Again, unbelievable numbers for a season that was only 2,445 laps to lead a third of them in IndyCar is unbelievable from Palou. But again, we talk about this season. I felt like was a coming of age for Pato O'Ward, because Archie, you mentioned the race at Barber last year, and I think to the one the year before that, and how things unravelled in Long Beach in 2023, where he crashed into, made a multi-car pile-up with Kirkwood, Ericsson and Grosjean, I think it was. And that level of patience is something that we haven't seen out of Pato O'Ward for a while. And then eventually the results started come. I mean, he was essentially, quote unquote, anonymous really at Indianapolis. And then after the Ericsson disqualification, they didn't have the pace to win it, but he still finished third. And that's another great chunk of points. These are results that we wouldn't normally have seen out of O'Ward in previous years that we are now starting to see. And it kind of goes back to that thing that this season has been a particularly strong one, but it's been out of the headlines. And perhaps there's an argument to say that that's almost done O'Ward a favour, and that pressure was off. Had he been sort of 50, 60 points behind, then the trouble that he had in Portland would obviously been exacerbated, and then maybe we wouldn't have got such a strong response in Milwaukee and then the pole in Nashville. So it's a lot of could haves and would haves, but having the pressure off probably helped. But here, because when he was in that first title fight in 2021, they were both incredibly young, Palou and O'Ward, but maybe a dash of inexperience kind of plagued that whole season. But yeah, this year it wasn't faultless, but it was definitely a coming of age and something that we hadn't seen this year. And you can go into next year with a great deal of positivity that I feel might not have come from the last time he finished. Well, I would say second, but it actually wasn't. When he was the last championship challenger in 2021.
It probably was a championship winning campaign in any other year, or at least very, very close to a championship winning campaign. It's just Palou was just in a different league. O'Ward's season looked a bit average in comparison. So, yeah, as I said, I think that's a good way of putting it. It's a championship level campaign. It's just because of the year Palou's had, it doesn't look like one.
I feel like what O'Ward has done this year, and something that's so critical in IndyCar, and I know we always use the word consistency, but he's maximised the year. I don't feel like there's much you can come away from this year and think he left anything on the table and like on any given weekend. And I don't think he's always been a maximizer, and that's what all of the top drivers are. They get the most out of every weekend. So that's probably the best way I'd put it, almost as to how impressive this year has been and what a step forward it has been to the O'Ward that we've been used to.
Okay, let's get on to our best driver of the season asterisk. James, do you want to take us off for your best driver of the year asterisk?
I tossed this one up between Lundgaard and Kirkwood for a little while. I went with Kyle Kirkwood in the end. I know that it phased out. There were just 2 results in the top 10 in the final 7 rounds to actually end up finishing 4th in the championship behind Scott Dixon. But after 8 races of the season, he had won 3 of them, which was a bit of rare IndyCar statistics, is that we'd only had 2 drivers win the first 8 races, again for the first time since a long time. As Dan said, it's hard to break IndyCar records when most of them date back from pre-color television, so difficult to tell whether they actually exist or not. But I think it does have to be Kyle Kirkwood. He got his first win of the season on his traditionally strongest stomping ground, that is Long Beach, and then just looked pretty strong throughout. He was always, you'd probably say, the top Andretti car. Ericsson had a terrible season, but Colton Herta was coming off a runners-up finish in last year's championship, and it didn't really materialize. It was Kirkwood driving the way forward for Andretti every single time, and then he maximized it in Detroit. He then won at Gateway, which was his first oval win in IndyCar. Again, another big box ticked for Kyle Kirkwood. And a bit like with Pato O'Ward, it felt like a coming of age season after 2023 when he won a pair of races, and then last year not quite being as strong. This year he was back and very much back with a bang. And yeah, he can take a whole load of credit from the year. I know races didn't go well. The Indy 500 being an exact example of that. And then the Iowa weekend was a weekend to forget for Kirkwood as well. And then finished the season not particularly strongly, as I said, 2 results in the top 10 in the final 7 rounds. But after O'Ward and Palou, it's kind of difficult to pick out anyone else. And he did win 3 in the season. And yeah, I just felt like being the strongest Andretti that he was, and particularly always like being the Andretti that was in the headlines and being at the front, and unlike the Fox scoring pylon, having his face on there, that's the big one in terms of like visibility in the series. And I just think Kirkwood brought that as behind O'Ward and Palou.
Kirkwood wasn't my pick, but I do just want to add on him. Like, I think 23 was such an impressive year that first season with Andretti because it had the peaks of the race wins. Then he improved in 24, even though he didn't have the same peaks, just because he was so consistent. And for the first half of this year, he kind of fused both of those things, and it was almost like Palou-like completeness in many ways. Obviously, Palou's closest challenger, but yeah, did just lose his way as the year went on, is the reason why I didn't pick him. And I think that is partly owing to Andretti's package. Like, they weren't particularly good on ovals this year, especially, I thought, for the most part. Dan, do you want to go next, or should I?
I'll go next because I went for Carl Kirkwood as well. So it makes sense if I lead on for James. I was in a very similar boat. I still don't actually know if I have decided between Lundgaard and Kirkwood, but I have gone for Kirkwood. Interestingly, he's actually got a lower average finishing position than Herta this year, but I think that's a lot down to his phantom penalty at the 500, where he lost 26 positions or whatever it was to where he actually finished. So it's a challenging one, but the reason why I give it to Kirkwood is I think towards the end of the year, Andretti's package wasn't as good and McLaren's looked very, very, very good. Hence why I'm happy to give Kirkwood a bit of the benefit on the doubt on this one, because all Andretti seemed to struggle a little bit. And Lundgaard did go winless, and it feels a bit weird to give him the best driver of the season asterisk if he went winless across the course of the year. So the first half of the year was really impressive for Kirkwood. I think we did have mid-season review, Archie. It might have been after Road America, quite possibly. I mean, he didn't get a single top 5 from that point onwards, so we sort of cursed it for the second half of the season, unfortunately. But
he was in the like start of episode bit, like we've had O'Ward in this episode. We did Palou and Kirkwood, and then it was alternative driver of the season other than those two. So
I don't even know how I went for then. I have to jog my memory back. But yeah, I mean, there's not really too much more to say. I think it was a really good year for Kirkwood. He sort of proves he can be consistent, but he can have that outright speed. I think we need to see the consistency over the course of the season, but at least his only 2 top 5s weren't victories, like it was in 2023. So it's a better year. I mean, he still finished the year with 10 top 10s and 5 top 5s, which isn't a bad statistic by any means. And as I said, the Indy 500 penalty really sort of makes his numbers look quite a lot worse than they actually were. I mean, would he have moved up in the standing? He probably would have actually moved up in the standings in third place if it wasn't for that penalty in the 500 as well, which may make things look even more different to what they are. As I said, I don't think Andretti's package was very good second half of the year, particularly on overs, which really did compromise Kirkwood. I feel like there weren't too many races where problems were his fault. I remember he had quite a scrappy one at Laguna with VK. I mean, the Iowa incident, they were just slow. I mean, he crashed in Highline, which sort of derailed his weekend there, in fairness. So, as Archie told us after, he was 4th place, as I well remember.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is the highlight of his year? You're missing a very important top 5.
Yeah, it was running 4th place when you crashed in Highline practice.
We'll never forget that.
The statistic of the year. But yeah, I think a good year for Kirkwood. I mean, next year's going to be really interesting how he gets on with power in the team, because, I mean, that's going to be a very different dynamic to what it is with Herta in the team. And it's a bit like Rosenqvist always does. Start the season very well and just sort of fade away second half. But I feel like, I mean, once the championship challenge to Palou really had faded from Kirkwood's side, I mean, it didn't really matter anyway. So, Great year for Kirkwood. I mean, 3 victories is more than he got in every other season combined. He won in an oval, which I feel like was a bit of a question mark about Kirkwood's oval ability coming to the season. He was never seen as really that good of an oval driver. So I still don't think he's an amazing oval driver, but he's proved that he can win on ovals. And I mean, street course wise, he could well be the best street course driver in the series, and that includes Palou. So a good year for Kirkwood. Stuff to build on, but I feel like there is such a huge gap between second and third in this that, like, there's a few drivers you could pick, and it isn't very clear cut because the top 2 were just so dominant in comparison to the rest of the field that it just isn't, like, it's hard to speak about these people's seasons.
I obviously went for Lundgaard. I feel like it had to be one of those two, really. I know he went winless, but I just think it can't be overlooked how massive a part he's been of what has been Aaron McLaren's best season to date. Like, he was still on the podium 6 times. He was an absolute monster on road courses. Unfortunately, he was competing against Palou, who was even more of a monster, but he was on the podium in 5 of the 7 road course races. And in getting those 6 podiums across the course of the season, he's eclipsed the joint tally of his predecessors, Rossi and Rosenqvist, and he did so in 15 races. In 15 races, he got those 6 podiums. It took Rossi and Rosenqvist 5 years to achieve 1 podium fewer combined, and that's just ultimately why I've picked Lundgaard. And I know part of that owes to the team is in a better spot, and still a pretty young team, still a developing team every year, and I just think it's super impressive because O'Ward's teammates have always struggled. I mean, none of O'Ward's teammates before this year had finished any better than 8th in the standings. Yet here you are with Aaron McLaren's first double top 5, 6 podiums apiece in the team. I know O'Ward took the wins, but 12 podiums is the most that Aaron McLaren have ever managed in an individual season. And I mean, you look at Lundgaard as well. I know you can kind of pinpoint misfortune for all of them, but Lundgaard qualified 3rd at Nashville, which is, that's his best oval qualifying display, probably by a margin, to be honest. I know the Aaron McLaren car was quick, but there've been times this season where he's really trailed O'Ward or he's really trailed Siegel, and this time, to be fair, like, he was right in the ballpark. O'Ward put an absolute blistering pole lap, but he was where he should have been. Let's just put it that way. And I just think Lundgaard's emerged as such a reliable driver, which is something Aaron McLaren weren't typically. And I mean, O'Ward's also become that this year, as we discussed, but 11 times Lundgaard was in the top 8. I think he was ultimately just cost by a bit of a lull in that mid-season phase. Ultimately, it was a lull not quite as bad as the one that Kirkwood had, but either of those guys could have finished 3rd in points, really. And I mean, somehow it ends up being Dixon, who we're not really discussing here. But yeah, I still think there's a bit of a way to go for Lundgaard to become a complete driver, because I don't think he's the complete package on ovals by any stretch of the imagination yet. Like, he's spoken about, because RLL's package was so bad, he's essentially having to relearn oval racing and oval driving now that he's got a better balance and a quicker car. And away from that, though, like, I feel like he was matching or even beating O'Ward on road and street courses for a lot of the time, and he was very close to being complete on that front. And like, ultimately, it's just the Palou factor again. But I feel like he's definitely helped to drive this team to a new level. They're now having 2 cars regularly in the fight every weekend, and if one car has something go wrong, they've at least got another car. But a lot of the time, both the cars are up there, and they can use that to their advantage on the strategic front. I think the relationship that Lundgaard has had with O'Ward has also helped to really drive one another on, but also the team. And I come away from this year actually thinking Lundgaard's the sort of driver that Penske will probably be really disappointed they missed out on, which I think is pretty high praise.
Okay, let's get on to the most improved driver, is who we will get on to next. And I think I better lead this one, because I'm the Kyffin Simpson speaker this season. I feel like I've done all the speaking for Kyffin Simpson because he hasn't got the praise he deserves, and he has been substantially improved on his rookie season. I mean, we all knew the circumstances Simpson came into the sport. He did have a lot of money, and that was of Chip Ganassi's interest, and he'd been part of that program for a very, very long time. And his rookie season, even so, was underwhelming. We didn't expect it to be particularly good, but it was underwhelming. There were no top 10s. He was lounging around at the back regularly, and I don't see much hope for Kyffin Simpson's IndyCar career. In year 2, he looks completely different. I mean, he obviously podiumed in Toronto, and that wasn't a fluke. Like, that was fully on merit. And there was, like, Mid-Ohio, there could have been a podium there if he didn't speed in the pits. There was another opportunity there. And then top 5s this season, he got, 3 top 5s, including at Nashville. Ovals really seemed like a weak point for Simpson. I'm not saying Nashville just turned the corner, but there's a lot of encouragement to be taken there that he can race competitively on an oval, and then 6 top 10s over the course of the season. Now, if he said that 12 months ago that Simpson would earn 6 top 10s the next season, people probably wouldn't really believe him, because he had shown none of that. And not these top tens weren't fluky. There were like, I would give it. There were some occasions, like Detroit, for example, where he got one of the top fives. He got there because he picked it just before a caution. But a lot of these results, he was there on pure merit, pure pace, and his qualifying was significantly better as well in comparison to 2024. I mean, his qualifying average, I think, last year was well into the 20s. This year was 16th. I think he qualified the top 15 once last season. He got 6 appearances in the top 12 positions this year, which is crazy improvement. And there is a bit more justification into why he was in that team. And he's proved that he's not a slouch who's bringing in money. He is a person who can get results on occasion. Sure, we need to see that consistently across the course of the season, but in comparison to how much Simpson struggled a year ago and sort of the concerns with his pace in general, I think this was a really impressive year.
Yeah, I think it's cut and dry that Simpson's the answer to this. Like, I think it's a bigger jump than anyone could have expected, really. Like, last year he was 21st in driver points, which, I mean, is pretty skewed by the fact that a lot of teams didn't have drivers completing the season. And only, if you look at entrant points, only the 2 Dale Coyne Racing entries were behind him. This year, he's essentially jumped from 25th to 17th in points and has scored 100 points more than he got last season, which is a massive jump. And I mean, you say 6 top 10s, 3 top 5s this year. He was only in the top 15 5 times last year. He was never in the top 10. And to have got that podium, and like, even if some of the results have been like owing to yellows or a strategy working out, at least he's executed from that point. Like, I wouldn't have been confident that he'd have stayed in these positions last year. And I just feel like his racecraft and even just like his understanding of races has appeared to have grown massively. And I think nothing outlines that more than ovals, which Chip Ganassi's even spoken about being his glaring weakness, that he ends the season with that massive 11, 12 lap side-by-side running with McLaughlin. It was a shame for Simpson, to be fair, that he didn't end up with the podium there. He probably would have deserved it, but I think that's an encouraging end to the season, that his biggest weakness, he displayed racecraft like that. And I think the pure pace that he's shown this year as well is just such a huge step forward, because he only started better than 20th 3 times in his rookie year. This year, he's only started in the 20s 5 times. He's got multiple fast 12s on road courses. Obviously, I almost think that Mid-Ohio 3rd place in qualifying was possibly the highlight of his year, to be honest, because like, qualifying, that is completely on merit. So that was really impressive. And yeah, there is obviously no getting away from the fact that he is largely in his seat because of money, but that doesn't mean you also can't be a talented driver, and he's put a heck of a lot of work into this. And I think he's being really rewarded for that now. And it's been very impressive development trajectory for a guy who's still only, 20 years old. It's impressive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of played tossed up between the two, but because you've both gone for Kip and Simpson, I'm going to go for Christian Rasmussen. I've been ringing the Christian Rasmussen bell for a long time, as we'll come on to. Those of you who listen to the post Milwaukee episode will have heard or seen me celebrating that prediction. But I mean, it's a similar thing with Simpson. It's a really strong upwards trajectory. 5 positions average finish better in 2025 than 2024 for Christian Rasmussen. 5 more top 15s, 5 more top 10s, 2 podiums, first win in IndyCar. I mean, he's led races for the first time as well, which he hadn't done. He's led 4 of them. He led laps at Indianapolis. I mean, overall, it was just a much better season for Christian Rasmussen than it was in 2024 as well. And I know he only did a road and street course program until Ed Carpenter finally decided that it was time to step aside for everything except the Indianapolis 500. And then Rasmussen, I mean, his prowess on ovals has always been there. And I mean, his best results last year, his 2nd and 3rd and 4th best results from 2024 all came in the last 3 rounds of the season, being at Milwaukee and then in Nashville. And then this year as well, incredibly strong in the second half of the season, 2 top 10s at the doubleheader weekend in Iowa. And then obviously the season highlighted by that stunning win in Milwaukee. Then it kind of unraveled a little bit with the crash in Nashville. and there was one more DNF than there was last year, bearing in mind he did do 4 more races this year than last year as well. However, overall, a really strong improvement from Christian Rasmussen, and then a driver that, you know, we don't really talk about him grabbing the headlines for potential available big seats in the future, but he could be there. He definitely grabbed headlines in Milwaukee. But yeah, I mean, a note on Kyffin Simpson is that he was just kind of quietly going about his business when no one expected him to be strong, and then ended up with quite reasonable results. Obviously, there were still some flaws, and was comfortably the slowest Ganassi car in places like the Indy 500 and in marquee events. However, overall, it was much stronger, and good seasons for both those drivers.
Okay, let's go on to one of the common awards on the show, which is the Unsung Hero Award. We obviously do this after every race to highlight those who don't get the praise they deserve. And obviously we're looking across the course of all 17 races for this one. So Archie, you can lead us off for this one.
It could only be one guy, couldn't it? Marcus Armstrong. The Armstrong ability.
There we go. I was about to say, you have to say the words for it to be true.
I'll be honest, it could just have easily been his teammate Rosenqvist, to be honest. I think neither of those guys have been talked about enough, and that Meyershank Racing team has not been spoken about enough for what an impressive season they've had. Like, this is the first time they've had 2 drivers in the top 10 in points, Rosenqvist 6th, Armstrong 8th. And I mean, the previous best across like 2 cars is, I know they've not had a 2-car lineup for that long, but it's 15th and 18th. They've never had a driver top 10 in points. So to be 6th and 8th across their 2 cars, only 2 years on from a season where they had 1 top 10 result all year, I think is pretty incredible. And okay, of course you can say like the Ganassi relationship's a factor, but look at last year with Andretti. Like, Rosenqvist was just as quick, and they've changed alliance and they're just as quick. So that's evidence that it's not all Ganassi. This is a Meyershank Racing team that is pretty small outfit. Yes, they've got that technical support, but they are thriving at the moment. But yeah, Armstrong's my pick because I really wasn't sure where he would be when he moved from Ganassi. Like, I just didn't know what he was as a driver, how good he was as a driver, really. And he's only ended up finishing 8 points shy of Rosenqvist. And obviously Rosenqvist has a lot more experience in the series than Armstrong does. And I know you've got to credit a bit of this performance to the fact that it was kind of, he changed team-ish, but not like completely, because he had a lot of stability in the engineering department from people he had on board at Ganassi. But even then, like, when you compare this version of Marcus Armstrong to the version of Marcus Armstrong last season, this is second full year, third year in the series, but it's like it's night and day. So much different. He beat Rosenqvist for top 10s. He was in the top 10 11 times. Rosenqvist 10. So I mean that in itself is extremely impressive. I mean, in the final 11 races of the season, Armstrong was only outside the top 10 twice, and obviously got that podium at Iowa. I think, speaking to the Iowa point as well, like, I'll be honest, I'm not really sure. I don't think we knew at the time how he got that podium. It was like peak Armstrong ability, wasn't it? But it does strike me how well he's taken to ovals. And I mean, it was a shame he had the crash at Indy, because he looked really fast, and he's a pretty complete driver. Like, I know he's got to have more peaks, but he's a very, very good driver, particularly on race day. Like, he's had some good qualifying performances, but he's methodical, he's clean, and it's an ability, genuinely, to be able to always be there kind of in the ballpark on race day. And I don't know, like, he reminds me a bit of Dixon. Like, we don't see unbelievable stuff in qualifying, but he's consistent, he's quick, and the fact that he always executes on race day, like, it's obviously to a much, much lesser extent, but there's something there, I think. And yeah, I've been massively impressed by him.
I'm going to go for Callum Ilott as unsung hero of the season, because after Prema parted ways with Michael Cannon at the start of the season, it could have been a very, very long campaign for them. And to be fair, it started in a difficult manner. And I've gone for him as my unsung hero because Schwartzman has basically grabbed all the headlines for Prema in their rookie season as an IndyCar team, because, I mean, remarkably, he was on the pole at the Indy 500, which was perhaps the most stunning thing that I've seen. And me and Archie are eating slices of humble pie whilst that was going on. However, 4 top 10 finishes in the final 5 rounds for Callum Ilott and the 90 team is very strong. And had they been in the leaders' circle kind of scenario, that would have dragged them over the line. And that entrant finished with more points than an Arrow McLaren and 2 Rahal Letterman Lanigan cars in their first season, which is particularly impressive considering this outfit could have been there to make up the numbers for large portions of the season with the way it worked. But they led laps, which is something that hasn't happened for a long time. I think only the 51 Dale Coyne racing car of Jacob Abel was the only full-time car not to lead laps this year. So yeah, they did well. They proved that they weren't just there to make up the numbers. And I chose Ilott because he didn't grab the headlines in the same way that his teammate did. But 4 top 10 finishes in the final 5 rounds is very strong. And yeah, to finish above Nolan Siegel's McLaren is something pretty strong, pretty noteworthy, I'd say. But I mean, it definitely doesn't grab the headlines because this is a battle for 21st in entrant points. But I think he did a reasonable job.
I've gone for Scott Dixon. How has anyone ended up in 3rd and absolutely nobody has realised?
I have him as my honourable mention. I do have him as my honourable mention.
Chip Ganassi said this. It's like the quietest 3rd place finish season of all time. Like, how did he end up there? Like, I don't think we saw Dixon once a year, apart from when Polo went off at Mid-Ohio and he was there to pick up the pieces. Like, where was he for the rest of the year? And he somehow still ends up in 3rd. I mean, it must be a thing of New Zealanders just appearing in positions without any real explanation, because, I mean, it feels like Dixon did pretty much nothing all year. So how is he in 3rd? I mean, I have got some statistics which might help, but I don't know how much they will help, to be honest, because nothing will help me understand it, really. I mean, he had 3 podiums. Obviously, one was in St. Petersburg right at the start of the year when he thought he should have won that race after him not having a radio. Then he had that podium in Iowa, the same one as Armstrong, where they sort of lucked into it a little bit because of the very late caution. Then he had 6 top 5s across the year, which, to be honest, isn't actually that many across 17 races for somebody to finish 3rd in points. I mean, Lundgaard got 6 podiums in comparison, and he only had 1 more top 10 than Lundgaard with 12. So how Dixon beat both Kirkwood and Lundgaard in points is honestly baffling, but he did, and credit to him. I mean, I think Dixon had no retirements, which I think helped him a lot. I mean, it's easy to forget that his 500 was effectively over before it began, when he had those problems so early on, which meant he finished 20th in that race. But other than that, I think his next lowest finish across the course of the season was 12th. So, like, it's sort of that just consistency where he wasn't really having any catastrophically bad days. He wasn't having many extremely good days. There was just no catastrophically bad days, which I think gives some explanation into how he ended up in 3rd. But it's a bit of a weird paradox that if Pelot didn't make the most basic of errors at Mid-Ohio, Dixon would have ended the year winless, which is incredible for a driver of Dixon's caliber. But I mean, it is just so Scott Dixon. He's brilliantly boring, whatever the word is. He just nothing really seemed to happen across the course of the season. He just ended up in 3rd with nobody batting an eyelid, because that's what Scott Dixon does, and that's what Marcus Armstrong does when he inevitably replaces Dixon in that seat, the way things are going. So I think we just need to give some credit to Dixon for finishing 3rd in points in a season where we paid absolutely no attention to him. I mean, the amount of airtime must have got on this show must have been about 5 minutes across the course of the year.
I think the only reason I didn't pick him is, like, he's definitely unsung and he's done a good job to finish 3rd. I just think by his standards, to have finished 259 points behind his teammate, I know this was exceptional from Pelot. And yeah, he's had a pretty consistent year, but he was pretty... I know there was that kind of spell in the mid-season where it seemed like him and Pelot always just spawned onto the same piece of track, no matter where Dixon started. But I just didn't pick him because I think he's unsung, but I don't want to say he's not like... I think it just felt like Hero was a bit extreme.
I will tell you why. Because they upped the lap count of those 6 races this year, or whatever it was, so he couldn't do this ridiculous fuel saves because they put in the anti-Dixon fuel-safe measures heading into the season, where we couldn't speak about Dixon. So I do get your point. I mean, for a driver of his caliber, like it is in some ways underwhelming, and it's a bit of a weird one for Dixon because, I mean, he isn't at his peak anymore. I think there's no denying that. His raw pace isn't really there, and he relies on his racecraft and experience to get results like he did in that mid-season phase between sort of Road America and Iowa. And I don't want to say Dixon's in his decline, but look, he's not the same Scott Dixon he was 10 years ago, is he? So, and Pallou's just seeing the headlines in that team. And it feels a bit difficult to ever see Dixon taking it to Palou across the course of the year going forward. But I just thought I needed to shoehorn in Dixon somewhere into this episode, because otherwise we'd never speak about him again.
Well, there's the flip side, to be fair. Like, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, and I should actually be saying it's pretty heroic that he's still doing this in his mid-40s. That's exactly something. I also want to give an honourable mention to a stat that I saw the other day, that Connor Daly actually was 4th in oval average finish, joint with his good mate Santino Ferrucci, actually, which I'm not sure how Ferrucci did that. But, yeah, Connor Daly had the 4th best average finish on an oval this year, behind Palou, O'Ward, and...
Well, no, Rasmussen. That's not true.
Is it not?
Fourth best of full-timers. Because Takuma Sato's got a better average than him for his one race. See, this is why I do my own statistics spreadsheet, so I can fact-check all of you. Takuma Sato was the best qualifier this season, I think you'll find, with his average qualifying position as second.
Well done, Taku.
Okay, let's go on to our favourite race of the year. Is the next one I like to get onto. This one isn't as clear cut. I think last year was very obviously the Indy 500. The year before that was very obviously Texas, and the year before that we didn't have a podcast, so we couldn't discuss it. So we'll discuss it now. James, you take us off for this one.
It might be recency bias, but both Nashville and Milwaukee were exactly what we kind of hope any IndyCar race is, because like no IndyCar race has the level of feel that the Indy 500 does, right? It just means so much more, which is why it's often the race of the season, but not always. As you say, Texas 2 years ago was quite clearly the standout, even though the 2023 Indy 500 was kind of a really, really stunning race as well. But because this year's Indy 500 it was a good race, but it will be like remembered as the year Palou became a legend in IndyCar, because he finally won the Indy 500, rather than it being, you know, the coldest Indy 500 for a long time, and the weird ways that people were crashing out. I mean, it didn't have a grandstand finish in the same way that Nashville and Milwaukee did, and I've kind of edged it towards Nashville, just because it almost felt like everything was basically over. First place was done for in the championship. Second place was done for in the championship. And again, it had so many weird things going on, but then ended, and it's both started after that first caution, after the Rasmussen crash, and ended with spectacular side-by-side racing. And that's kind of everything we want to see from an IndyCar oval. And yeah, I went for Nashville. I mean, that sequence of Palou and O'Ward being side by side for multiple laps was stunning, and then to have that with McLaughlin and Simpson at the end as well, with the race on the line, and Newgarden going for a win basically at home, and Palou going for his 9th of the season, and then you had Simpson and McLaughlin side by side for a while. It just made for really, really great TV, and with the numbers again being as high as they were for Nashville, I'm going to edge it that way. I definitely enjoyed it the most as well. Maybe that again is because, like, quote unquote, all the pressure was off, but it was just such a great spectacle and a really good way to end the season with. But unfortunately, people's memories may not last 6 months. And we'll have to see where any kind of positive momentum with IndyCar seems to kill it. It would have been great if the season had kind of been flipped. We had 5 different winners in the final 5 races. With the new TV deal, it'd have been better if we had 5 different winners in the first 5 races and have the level of races that they were, because no offense, but St. Pete was pretty pedestrian. But yeah, it's a very long way of saying that the final race of the season was the best race of the season. And so I'm going to give it to Nashville.
Well, I mean, for me, Nashville came close. I think Milwaukee, the finish was spectacular. I think there were points of that race where it wasn't as brilliant. Honestly, I think Iowa was better than expected. I would throw
Yeah, but what was the expectation?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's
one
the thing.
overtake.
That's the thing. I think, to be honest, like, we always pick ovals, and I'm picking an oval, but I'd throw Road America in there. It's hard to have a recollection of some of the races, but I seem to remember that being a pretty good non-oval race. But yeah, I've gone for Gateway. I think after the 500, we had that very weird start to the season where there weren't very many cautions, and the races, I think pedestrian's a good word, actually, James. They were a bit boring. And then Detroit was just a bit silly. And after that, like, we had some really good races. And I think for me, nothing quite was better than Gateway. And I think, to be fair, it's been excellent the last 2 years. This year, even better than last year. And that was a race that previously, of all the oval races, wasn't quite as good. Like, there are a few years where that was a bit of a dud. But this year, especially, it was phenomenal, I thought. Like, I think it showed just how good IndyCar racing is under the lights. Obviously, Fox moved it to prime time, and I think we need that more. Like, it was so cool, and it just felt like perfect conditions for racing, perfect conditions to get a great audience watching the brilliant racing. And I feel like some races, kind of as I pointed out there, that it's quite hard to recall some of them, just fade into kind of almost anonymity, and you don't really remember them. This felt like a big deal. It felt like an event, and obviously that starts with the big fireballs before the race, but then you had the actual racing as well. Like, I particularly remember Daly and O'Ward's fight for the lead, but he just had everything. Like, I feel like Nashville, Milwaukee, there were some phases of the race where it became not processional, but where the high line disappeared a bit, and it was a bit of kind of follow the leader. Gateway, though, was like, it just felt unrelenting. And I don't remember every detail of that race because it was a few months ago now. We've had, 11 races since then, 10 races since then. But it was one of those where it felt like it was intense, and there weren't really very many lulls, and everything was happening. It was one of those where you kind of got a bit of a headache because the strategy is so weird. There were loads of incidents. Like, it was the one where all the Penske's had something go wrong. Newgarden ended up upside down. There was jeopardy. Like, it felt like, I think I said this at the time, like, every driver in the field seemed to have something go wrong for them. It was like such a story of peaks and troughs for like everyone. And yeah, that's just the race I remember most. Particularly remember the like 6 a.m. bedtime, and it was already light outside by the time I went to sleep. But yeah, I just thought that was a really cool race, and we need more ovals, and we need more ovals at night.
Yeah, I've gone for Nashville. I may be a recency bias case here, but what I will say is, what a blessing in disguise that the construction to the NFL stadium was. My goodness, we turned Nashville into an absolute embarrassment every year to be an IndyCar fan, as casuals just took the piss out of this terrible national race in the street, which just crash after crash after crash, to actually a really, really, really good season ender on a good mile and a third high-speed oval, which you don't really get anywhere else across the course of the season. It sort of just reaffirms the belief we need more mile and a half ovals in the calendar, because these cars are built to race well on mile and a half ovals. Sure, I like a Milwaukee, I like an Iowa, but I feel like the high speed nature of these ovals, these cars can race on. And I know what I would say is the high line maybe struggles after a couple of laps, and that's something which IndyCar still needs to work on. But we had those phases side-by-side racing for plenty of laps. So like Nashville, like, the leader seemed to be in a different sort of calamity every 5 minutes. There was racing up and down the field. I mean, it was gloves off because it didn't matter, because you were fighting for very little in most cases. We had the Rookie of the Year drama at the end when Schwartzman just threw it away after Foster had thrown it away a couple of laps earlier. And I just think it's such a fun race to end the year, obviously Newgarden winning his home race as well. And it's such a better way to end the year than a chaotic street event. I know they're going to change the layout anyway, but can you imagine ending off the season of a championship battle on who can crash the least or who doesn't get caught up in an incident, when we could have really fun, high-speed oval action to end the season, which is sort of one for the IndyCar purists, really, isn't it? It's what IndyCar sort of heritage is built on, racing on these high-speed ovals. I've really enjoyed Nashville. Nice way to end the year. And as I said, I think last week, it's a bit of a weird year where the first couple of races were a lull. Then we got to the mid-season where they actually got quite a bit better. Sort of fundamentally, for a casual, they were pretty unwatchable before they got to, okay, this is entertaining. And then the end of the season, we're getting barnstormers. So progressively ramped up, which is what James said. We want the opposite. We want to start off with barnstormers, and as the championship fight is dying down, and as we're like, oh, the IndyCar season's going to win. Just want some lulls to go, okay, I'm fine in missing this for a couple of months. Not the other way around where you get back in, it's, oh, well, this wasn't as good as I hoped. So by the end of the season, you're like, where's the rest of the calendar? Why do we end in August? So that's my thoughts on Nashville. 1 mile and a half, please, and a better calendar. Get Nashville at the start. That's why Texas was so good start of the season. Like a little wake-up call to start of the year. But let's move on to the moment of the year. I feel like it's probably pretty unanimous. And I'll lead for this one because I'm not changing since my mid-season moment of the year, which is Robert Schwartzman's pole at the Indianapolis 500. I mean, it's still quite uncomprehendable that it actually happened in my mind. Like, how did Schwartzman in his first day race end up on pole? Like, I remember him having a good draw when he got to the fast 12, and I was like, hey, I mean, you get a good draw sometimes. These things happen. And then he got through the fast 12 into the fast 6, and you're like, oh my goodness, okay, Prema has shown up here. Impressive performance for the first time at Indianapolis. Well done. And then he goes in his pole run and he sets a time that nobody can get close to. And you watch the cars tick down one by one in disbelief that nobody can match first timers Robert Schwartzman and Prema on both of their first over race. And I mean, the emotions were so cool to see. I mean, I'm sure not many people in Indianapolis had heard of Robert Schwartzman before then. I know the ending of his race was pretty disappointing, but I feel like the story of this team who had a sponsorless car, who was their first over race, they had just come to America to try IndyCar, and they're on pole for the biggest race of the year. One of the biggest motorsport moments of the year, leading the field to the green for the Indy 500, would be done by a rookie in his first ever over race. And I just think, just the craziest stories. You can list off so many people who haven't taken pole at Indianapolis 500, like Joseph Newgarden, for example, wasn't taking a pole at Indianapolis 500. Pato O'Ward, for example, wasn't taking a pole at Indianapolis 500. Colton Herta, the list goes on. And here we have Robert Schwartzman in his 6th IndyCar race on pole for the biggest race of the year. And like the reaction, such raw reaction, and sort of just a disbelief was so cool. And I know you two probably mentioned it in a minute, but like the fact that he was the favourite to get bumped just makes the story so much more amusing. And yeah, just what a cool moment it was.
Thought about the Schwartzman throne for a really, really long time, but then I was like, the first thing that thought to myself, I was like, I'm going to stick to my guns, and it's when Rasmussen passed Palou in Milwaukee. Like just because of, I mean, it's definitely it's definitely a personal moment of the season. Just because I'm not going to say I called it, but like I did mention it on this show a while ago. I mean, yeah, I had Schwartzman actually for a later category in being on the pole for the 500. But yeah, very much time to eat some humble pie at that point, because I mean, we were so sure after Prema lost Michael Cannon that they were going to struggle at the 500, because I mean, he just is a master of making cars go well around there. And the jump that AJ Foyt Racing made between 2022 and 2023 with Michael Cannon at the helm was something quite remarkable. And so then going to Prema and starting that operation out, I thought, yes, this could be the start of something. Then obviously it didn't happen. And maybe he just left his folder unattended on the front desk before he left as a parting gift, because yeah, for Schwartzman to turn up and to do that, I mean, Dan, you kind of explained how the day went particularly well. It was it was mind-blowing. It really was. And yeah, as you say, it still kind of hasn't really stuck in. Like when you look at when you try and remember who was on the pole for different Indy 500s, and you go back, and 2024 was McLaughlin, the fastest ever, and then 2023 was Palou, the previous fastest ever. 2022 was Dixon, the previous fastest ever, and then 2021 was Dixon again. 2020 was that famous because Marco Andretti did it. Like, these are such great names, and 2025 you're going to look at that and be like, wow, that was something truly special, with the brackets R next to his name. Again, something that's truly might not be top for a very, very long time. But yeah, on a personal note, the Rasmussen pass on pole for Milwaukee was so cool, just because I think it kind of embodied how Christian Rasmussen races. We first kind of noticed it for real at the 500 in 2024, when he was just making these passes in practice that no one else would kind of dare to make, because you just knew the gravity of the problem that would occur if something went wrong. And he passed Polo with, you could put a piece of paper in between their wheels. I think they do basically make contact coming out of turn 4, and yet he kept his foot in it and took the lead, and essentially then took off. He nearly then stacked it, lapping another car, which I thought very much embodied Christian Rasmussen. It was, and the spotter was being like, "Yeah, we don't need to do this. Just chill." And it was like, "Yeah, but I'm going to drive around them." But yeah, the Schwartzman one, I mean, it is incredible, and it's one very much for the history books.
Yeah, I mean, Rasmussen's spotter, that was one of my favourite moments of the season, actually. I'd also give a shout out to Louis Foster's pole as well, the rookie on pole that people aren't really talking about, doing that in the longest track of the season as well at Road America. But yeah, it's got to be Schwartzman for me. Like, it's been a bizarre year for Prema, because I mean, Michael Cannon left, but still much of their strength has come on ovals rather than the types of track that are more familiar to them. Only latterly, really, with Ilott shining, particularly in this late season phase, if they seem to figure out the thing that was more familiar to them. Yeah, it's a weird one, especially now in the context that there's reports swirling that Schwartzman might kind of be a one and done as well, and that could be his only season in IndyCar, which could make this all the more quirky, really. But yeah, I mean, if it does happen to be the end, we don't know if that is the case. He's produced one of the Indy 500 moments of all time. Like, the team had never done an oval event, and a driver who had never done an oval event, and their fortnight started in terrible fashion. They missed practice pretty much entirely on the Tuesday, the first day of practice. And there's a lot of people criticizing them, saying, are they underprepared? Have they not respected the event? But I guess as events transpired, you kind of think of it in the opposite way. Well, maybe they were actually respecting the event by not going out when they felt they couldn't. Yeah, I mean, the turnaround that they had was pretty inspiring. It was undoubtedly one of the greatest stories of the Indy 500, which is one of the most storied, is the most storied event, not one of them. It is outright the most storied event in IndyCar. And think of all the things that have happened through the history of this event. I mean, Dan, I think back to our history segment we did last off season and some of the crazy things. This, if you reflect on it in 100 years' time, will be right up there. Like, it takes so much to master Indianapolis. Like, any minor imperfection can have massive consequences. But here you have rookie Robert Schwartzman for the rookie team on pole by over 0.3 miles per hour as well. Like, it was pretty resounding in the end. And yes, I mean, Dan keeps on reminding us that we said Schwartzman would be bumped. But it is logical. Like, a driver-team combination for whom ovals were alien. Of course they're going to get bumped. I mean, the fact that they not only made the field in the end, not only avoided bump day, not only made the Fast 12, not only made the Fast 6, but became the first rookie driver on pole in 43 years, the first rookie team on pole in 42 years. It's like as good an underdog story as you will ever see. It's incredible.
Okay, here's always the more slightly awkward one. Who's our disappointment of 2025? And dare I say it, there's actually quite a lot to go through this season.
I know I'll go first for the next one. I'll let James go first for this.
Okay, I've got a load, so there might be a few honourable mentions, but the quite clear and glaringly obvious one is Team Penske. I feel like that should be reasonably resounding. I mean, winless through the first 14 rounds is incredible for them. I mean, it was a long time coming in 2021 when it took Joseph Newgarden until July the 4th to win in IndyCar in that season. And that was like, okay, Team Penske have finally arrived, but that took a while. No. it took until Portland and the 15th round of the season for Team Penske to end up in victory lane. And they were finding all kinds of weird, wacky and wonderful ways to do it. I mean, Newgarden crashing out of the lead in Gateway in that incident with Louis Foster, just as Fox were cut into the ad break is, I mean, it is like one of the strangest moments of television you're ever going to see. I mean, the clip went viral, but yeah, I mean, all the Team Penske cars had basically a season to forget. And then there was a whole dynamic with, is Will Power going to get sacked or not? But he's by far the best performing Team Penske car that season, got them their first win, finished the highest of the Team Penske cars in the standings. Although I didn't realize that he only just pipped McLaughlin by a singular point after McLaughlin got back-to-back thirds in Milwaukee and at Nashville. But yeah, I'm sure Team Penske will be expanded on, but that was one of the problems. I've already kind of touched on the rest of them already with the season scheduling, and because it was difficult for Fox to kind of gain any momentum when you started with St. Pete, which wasn't great, but had St. Pete been followed with like something like Texas a week or 2 weeks later, although like, you know, that number might still have dropped, it might have been more enticing to a casual viewer to see that, whereas it went to the Thermal Club and then obviously the entire TV feed died for basically 20 laps. And that again was a nightmare for IndyCar. It just didn't start well, the Fox partnership. So that was a disappointment because it could have really been turning a corner. And I know there's these great numbers that IndyCar was the highest growing series out of any that has an average of more than 1 million viewers throughout the season, but those numbers are obviously spun because the Indy 500 was so strong this year, and all the races were on network TV. So that felt like a disappointment. I just wanted to put the Indy 500 finish in there, just with the two RLL cars kind of being a plug in the way of what could have been a really enticing three-way battle between Palou, Ericsson, and Malukas. As I've said twice now, we'll remember the 2025 Indy 500 for Palou winning and not much more, and maybe the Team Penske drama as well. And then the Iowa being not disappointing, because Archie, you said you were kind of pleased with how Iowa raced, but that's because the standards were through the floor after the disappointment of 2024. I just thought it was disappointing because it lacked attendance and racing. And that's one of the things that I feel when IndyCar races are good when they're better attended. I don't know what it is, but it's just how the world works. And the reason I'm going to say why Nashville and Milwaukee were so strong is because they were well supported. So yeah, I've been through, there's quite a lot to digest there. But I mean, this season, I mean, earmarked by Team Penske having a nightmarish season, and then a few other kind of annoyances from me.
I mean, I sent it to you first for one particular reason, because I think the overwhelming disappointment in the season is Marcus Ericsson.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm a big fan of James not touching on the elephant in the room.
Because, like, okay, I will get onto Penske in the next category, but I'm not like, I don't feel like I can even call him a disappointment because it was such a weird year. Like, so much weird stuff happened. For me, it's Ericsson. Like, categorically, I don't see anything like. I know Penske was disappointing in some ways, but there's so many weird caveats that Ericsson's a guy we used to absolutely hail for his consistency. And like, okay, maybe he was never consistently bringing majorly high peaks, but he was almost always in the top 10 when he was with Ganassi. Like, he was 6th in the championship 3 successive seasons before he left for Andretti. Across 3 seasons, he was outside the top 10 only 12 times in 50 races. That's 38 times in the top 10 in 50 races. And in that run, he had 44 top 12 finishes in 50 races. Like, this is one of the most reliable drivers in the field. Across his 2 years with Andretti, he has 10 top 10s in 34 races. Only 2 of those came in 2025. I know, obviously, the 500 was taken away, but that's the only good thing I feel like he did all year. And I hate to be that harsh, but like the first year with the team last year was disastrous. Like 15th was his worst championship finish since his rookie season. And he said like he gets better in the second season with the team once he's comfortable, once he knows people, once he's adapted. He worked really hard in the off season, putting loads of physical work, did loads of work with his mental trainer, And if last year was a disaster, what was this year? Like 20th in points is outright worst season. It's his worst points tally in 7 seasons in IndyCar by 56 points. Bear in mind, like he's had seasons that have been as few as 14 races, and like, I mean, even if he got the points from the 500, it's still his worst season points wise ever. So like, sure, like James, you probably have a better knowledge of things that might have gone wrong, but I felt a lot of the time he was just slow, like most of the time against his teammates, and like pretty resoundingly so. And I'm not sure what issues there were throughout the season of like execution on the team front, but this was so bad. Like he wasn't even in the top 15 in half the races. Again, the 500's the 500, but yeah, just I honestly don't know what to say. He's stuck in such a big hole that like he's now at a point in this third car for a slimmed down, focused Andretti team that Devlin DiFrancesco was in when they had a fourth car that was underperforming. I mean, it's disappointing to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I felt somebody else was going to go for Ericsson, so I didn't, but I've still got a few points I was going to raise. His qualifying average is 13th, which isn't hideous, but it's still behind both Kirkwood and Herta. Now, his average race finish this season is 18th this season. 18th for somebody who was a reliable top 10 week in, week out driver. His average finish was 2 whole positions behind Connor Daly and Kevin Simpson. Imagine saying that 12 months ago. I mean, he was behind Graham Rahal as well, just as an example, and he was incrementally above Louis Foster and Nolan Siegel. So, I mean, it was a disastrous year in every way you look at it. And I think the 500, you're putting it as a bit of a caveat, but I'm not going to, because one, I mean, he kind of got a bit lucky on a strategy to cycle to first, but he had a better car, he had fresher tyres, and he had track position on a track that was very difficult to overtake by the traffic, and he still lost the Indy 500. Like, I don't think he could have been presented a much better opportunity to win the race, and he lost it. He lost it a straight duel to when he had pretty much every advantage that he could have asked for. So that side is disappointing as well, because he should have really won the Indy 500, and then outside of that has had a catastrophic year. And he had that engineering change mid-season. That was okay. That's going to hopefully turn the tide. Didn't really do anything as far as results are concerned. And yeah, 2 top 10s across the course of the season for somebody whose consistency was unmatched. It just doesn't make sense. I don't understand how last season, okay, you can kind of excuse things, but for it to go so much worse this year doesn't really make any sense. And as you say, it's like he's made errors. Thermal, he made an error, and obviously Laguna Seca, he made another key error, which lost him quite a lot on both occasions there. But he was not like he was running particularly well in those races anyway. He just doesn't seem competitive, particularly on Sundays. I mean, he feels invisible in a lot of cases. Like, there's just days where it's like the Marcus Ericsson of old. Where is he? But not in a good way.
I echo everything you say, because like it kind of, both Andretti seasons kind of started the same way for Ericsson, with a very competitive performance in St. Pete. In 2024, he got basically a sum total of 0 of those points because the engine expired. And that would kind of set the scene for what would then transpire through 2024. But he actually finished 6th in St. Pete with a very reasonable run. It didn't set the world on fire, but it was kind of the Marcus Ericsson we'd seen from Chip Ganassi Racing. And then kind of everything just went downhill from there. And yeah, as you said, it was just slow. Like, he was a mile an hour slower kind of on every oval qualifying. And you'd be, because he was starting those oval qualifying so far down, you'd be like, oh, that looks like a reasonable benchmark when he goes 7th. But then after Newgarden had been having his horrific season, he'd then go next, and you'd be like, oh, well, that's going to qualify him 15th. It just all seemed to unravel. I mean, a lot of it was not helped by the fact that I think in 4 weekends in a row between Road America and Toronto, there was some kind of mess up on the 28 pit crew. And I mean, we talk about how Herta's pit crew have cost him a lot of points, podiums, potential race wins throughout the last couple of years. But I mean, pit crew error. I mean, he only got into the 500 lead because of a pit crew error, which meant that they decided to try something off strategy, because he'd essentially been running reasonably anonymously in around 10th to 15th of the 500, and then they dropped a wheel nut, which allowed him to do something completely different. So yeah, it's a mix of, sometimes you can kind of get away with having bad performances because other kind of facets are going well. You can be put on good alternative strategies and luck can fall your way. But I mean, in this scenario, it's definitely you make your own luck. And yeah, it was a pretty horrific season overall.
I won't spend too long on Team Penske either, because that's not actually my ones, but I feel like I didn't pick Penske for this because I feel like a lot of luck, but especially on Newgarden's side, was actually out of their control. Yes, their package wasn't good, but I can probably recall 15 occasions this season where something went wrong through no fault of their own. I've actually gone for Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, and the fact is, 3 cars, 3 top 10 finishes across the course of the year. I mean, I don't know where to start, really. I mean, Rahal has, ever since 2020, he's progressively got worse in his championship finishing position every single season. This is the worst year since 2010 for Rahal. And, I mean, 3 top 10s is pretty catastrophic for a driver of his experience. Louis Foster finally got Rookie of the Year, was expected to, but, like, no top 10s across the course of the season. Like, I feel like Foster proved in Indy Next that he is a good driver. And an Indy Next champion we've seen star in recent years in their rookie season in some cases. To get no top 10s, I feel like is hugely disappointing. And Devlin DiFrancesco really didn't seem any different to how he was at Andretti, apart from the annual Indy Road Course good qualifying that we get at that team. And then 16 other races are always a disaster. So I think that the main thing for me is Rahal on ovals. I've said this every oval episode we've covered, but I don't understand how they've had a package which is so poor for 3 years, and where he is multiple laps down purely on pace, and he is moving a chicane. I do not understand how it's taken 3 years and we still haven't resolved this issue, and it's only going backwards, especially when he has got teammates who are significantly less experienced than him, who are doing a better job than him on ovals and are significantly quicker than him. I don't understand how he can have such a disparity. I mean, the whole oval package is pretty awful anyway, but their road course package is garbage too at the minute. I mean, as I said, 3 top 10s is pretty, across 3 cars, is pretty disgraceful. And you can really trace it back to when they upgraded to 3 cars, because they were a front running team and they could win races. I mean, they won the Indy 500 with Takuma Sato. And I mean, Sato was going to run again this year at the Indy 500. And ever since then, I feel like things have got progressively worse. And now their package is awful. And they just don't have good cars. And I mean, I'm not here to make a decision, but it feels like, I mean, we've seen teams slim down. No, it wasn't Ganassi's choice. And I know it wasn't, but Andretti chose to go from 4 to 3. And I feel like they've both made huge improvements since downsizing. And I don't understand what Rahal would lose out by downsizing, selling one of their charters, which they could reinvest into hopefully a better team. Because, I mean, where do you even start? Like, they're just markedly going down every single season in performance, whatever they do. Nothing is changing. Every year, it's, we've had this really engineering change. Everyone's so fresh. Everyone's got all this energy. Everyone's so excited for the year ahead. We've made huge changes. And nothing ever changes apart from the fact they're only just getting worse. And I think that's maybe not being talked about enough, just how poor they've been as a team.
I also had RLL noted down. I just feel like the qualifying's not been awful on road and street courses. I mean, Foster, I thought was particularly impressive in qualifying with 6 from 7 road courses. He ended up in the Fast 12. That was one of my favourite stats to follow this year, until it all went pear-shaped in Portland and stopped it from being 100%. But I think they've been having an absolute nightmare on Sundays on every car, really. Like that, and I think the drivers have earmarked this as well, but their execution, their speed on a Sunday has been pretty dreadful. And yeah, the oval thing it's pretty mystifying, really, because like, even was it Milwaukee that Rahal actually qualified pretty well, but then you get to the race and he's immediately again moving chicanes, the words I have written down in my notes. It's It's crazy, like, because as you say, Dan, like they seem to have talk now. Like it's been probably three off seasons in a row now. There's been this talk of reshuffling internally and getting new high quality personnel in, and it's getting better. But it's not getting better, and it's not getting better no matter who they seem to have in the team. And okay, maybe it will be a time thing now. Obviously, Jay Fry came in earlier this year, and maybe things won't be immediate because they have found themselves in such a bad spot. And I guess having the pace on Saturdays and even showing glimmers of pace in qualifying on an oval is something. But there's such a long way to go with that team. Such a long way to go.
So just to finish up on RLL, there have of every driver in IndyCar that has ever started more than 50 races, only one of them has never finished in the top 10, and that's Devin DiFrancesco.
Yeah, and I mean, the likes of Stingray Rob were getting top 10s this season. So for our final category, let's go for our surprise of the year. This can be positive, negative, whatever way you decide to spin it. It doesn't need to be a driver or a team. It can be any angle that you decide to take. So Archie, you can take us for the surprise.
This is where I do my big Team Penske inquest, because I put it more as a surprise than a disappointment, because it's just so like baffling how this year has kind of panned out for them. Like just some stats to kind of outline it. Not since 2007 had Penske not had a single driver in the top three in points. Not since 07-08 had they endured a 15-race winless streak. Before Power finally won in Portland in round 15, the team only had 5 podiums, 2 of which came in the same race at Iowa. Power ended the season 9th in points as their best placed driver. That is the worst place that the best Penske car has been in the championship since 1999. This has essentially been Penske's worst season since 1999, which is astonishing, really. And they've entered the season with 12 DNFs. McLaughlin's Indy 500 DNS as well, which felt like it kind of epitomized the team's season, really. That, yeah, I think you touched on this earlier, James. Everything that could go wrong seems to have gone wrong, and at times it has been comical. I think I mentioned Gateway earlier when all 3 cars were wiped out through nothing that was in their control. 3 best cars in the field, one of them was destined to win that race. It was absolutely like, if you don't laugh, you'll cry, is kind of how I put that. And I think you can put some of how the season's panned out down to like not quite the usual Penske perfect execution. I think particularly on road courses, they've lacked a bit of pace. Like even aspects like pit stops or qualifying strategy or race strategy, there's been points where it's not been tip-top as such as we'd maybe be used to. Like I think you can earmark a point where the drivers have each made mistakes. Like I feel like they've all had at least one incident that was their own doing. Like I've tried to come up with the words throughout the season to describe it. I think bewildering is the one I like the most. It's been a bewildering amount of misfortune. It's like genuinely inexplicable how much has happened that's been outside of their control that has set them back through this year. Like engine problems, fuel pressure problems, hybrid problems, suspension problems, seatbelt problems. Again, like how does that happen? And I mean, poor Joseph Newgarden ends up upside down. He ends up on top of another car. Like, and then adding to all of this as well, you've had the unsettling technical infringement in qualifying for the 500, which obviously led to the penalties. Probably more extreme than that was the leadership changes that came from that Roger Penske decided to enact. And at times it's appeared to be a team in a bit of turmoil. And obviously with Power moving on, they're facing a bit of a reset into next year. And I don't know, maybe that'll prove a good thing. But it's just been a bonkers year. I think Newgarden's kind of been at the peak of those issues. So if I was to pick an individual driver as surprise of the year, it's been Joseph Newgarden, because I mean, for most of the season, he's been floating around 20th in points. And to be honest, it speaks volumes about his season that finishing 12th in points, his worst since 2014, actually kind of feels like a success. I found it pretty sad, actually, last week. He posted on Instagram, he'd done a helmet swap with Connor Daly, and part of the caption was, "Back when we raced purely for the love of it." And yeah, that just kind of, I don't know, that it made me sad. And I feel like it kind of represented this downcast version of Newgarden that we've seen this year. It does feel like he has seemed to lose a bit of the enjoyment again, I feel like, and he's been, I think a lot of that is the fact that in the fan base, in the media, he's been quite unfairly vilified a bit. Like, there's been a lot of unwarranted negativity surrounding him. And I am just glad for him. I said this in the Nashville episode, that he's ended the year with a win and that he can now go into the off-season with a bit of momentum, the chance for a bit of a reset. But yeah, for many years now, it's felt like he's been in some sort of crisis. And I don't know, we need this like bubbly, positive Joseph Newgarden back that just seems to have disappeared in recent years.
I've already mentioned a little bit about my surprise of the season because it was definitely the Robert Schwartzman. I think just the scale of how it took everyone by surprise is the nice one for the Schwartzman. So I'm going to kind of change the premise a bit and go for the most surprising moment of the season, which took place on bump day at the Indy 500 qualifying. And it was when Rinus VeeKay scrubbed his lap time off the board to go and do another one. I've genuinely never sat in front of the TV thinking, I feel like I know a lot about IndyCar and I have no idea why they've done this. Like, because he then went about a mile and a half slower. He was down in the 227s, and I think he'd set a low 229 to start with, if my memory serves me correct. And then he scrubbed that time off the timesheet, ran in the mid 227s, and I was genuinely looking at that thinking that he may have just sent himself home if Jacob Abel could do another one. Now, it didn't transpire that way, but for those brief 10 minutes, I was thinking this could be the most shocking thing that happens this year because it would have been all his own doing. Yeah, that was totally baffling. The fact that I don't know who made that decision. I don't know why they made that decision. I guess they believed they could go faster. They didn't need really to go faster. Abel's car had been getting slower and slower since Thursday and since his initial runs in Fast Friday, which really weren't that bad. But yeah, bizarre. No other word to describe it. That was my most baffling moment of the season. I couldn't believe it.
I really like that. Nice niche one. I think if I recall correctly, it was actually VeeKay who made the decision. I don't know why they made that decision. That was utterly bizarre because like they're essentially banking on Jacob Abel gaining 2 or 3 miles per hour to put him under any sort of threat. Yeah, that's a great shout. I really like that.
So Penske was my number one option, but I won't repeat what you said. I've also got a few. I think Lundgaard, Harry took the fight to award, was a bit of a surprise for me. Was one, but I think one that really stands out is how bad Santino's Ferrucci claim was that he'd fight for a championship. It's just, it seemed like a bit of a brain dead statement at the time. And I mean, it's just a bit embarrassing, really, isn't it? He ended up getting 41% of the points that the champion did over the course of the season. And it was a really strange year for Ferrucci because him and Maluka started the season pretty hideously. I mean, until the Indy 500, none of them had a top 10. And after the Indy 500, until I think Road America, they just went in this sensational run of form where they got 3 podiums in 4 races between the 2 cars. Ferrucci had 4 top 5s in a row on completely different types of track. And he got 2 top 10s for the rest of the year and he had that crash in Toronto, then he crashed at Laguna Seca and he crashed in Portland 3 races in a row, completely by himself. And it was a very bizarre year for Ferrucci, just no consistency at all, highlighted by an insane stretch of 4 races. And last season was Ferrucci being ultra consistent, racking up these top 10s. I think he had 11 top 10s last season. He ended up with 6 this year. I think Malukas only ended up with 5, but Malukas was showing scintillating pace on ovals, which Ferrucci really wasn't showing. Like, Ferrucci was being hailed as one of the most exciting over racers, as a top caliber oval driver. But we didn't really see any of that. Malukas took all the headlines, and Ferrucci was regularly qualifying down the 20s in ovals and showing absolutely no pace at all. I mean, one thing that really still stands out about Ferrucci is how poor he is in qualifying. I mean, he qualified in the top 12 just twice this season. His average qualifying was 18th. I mean, it's pretty disastrous. I mean, Malukas, for comparison, his qualifying average was the 3rd best of any full-timer, and his average was under 10. And I think those claims are a bit embarrassing for Ferrucci. I mean, as I said, it's a bit weird that him and Malukas actually end the season on the same points if you take away his Detroit penalty. and they ended up 5 positions apart in the standings, which sort of shows how close it was. But I just think the fact he made those pre-season statements that he was so confident they challenged for a championship, they'd be winning races week in, week out, and they'd be a contender. For him to be so poor for 75% of the season, I think was just quite the surprise, I think. I mean, I didn't expect him to win a championship, but my word, I didn't expect his claims to be as embarrassing as they were.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you could say it was a hot and cold year, but it was more kind of like cold, boiling, freezing, how it kind of panned out. It was very odd. Like, I don't know how he's ended up with the joint 4th best oval average if you discount Takuma Sato's one race, as you were saying, Dan. But yeah, like, I think qualifying's been the particularly glaring thing, where Malukas has been so quick and Ferrucci's been, the complete opposite. It's been a huge regression from last year, where he was this really consistent, reliable guy. Like, it's been a completely different year. And yeah, I thought we'd seen a bit of a transformation last year, and maybe this year will prove to be an outlier. But I think next year's crunch time in that regard.
I think more it's just objectively hilarious that after he said that, there was then like no top 10 finishes in the first 5 rounds. I think that's just kind of the funniest part of it all, starting the year with a pair of 14th places. But yeah. And also the fact that he was just getting, like, Townsend Bell was consistently mentioning Ferrucci in qualifying and at the start of races. And to be fair, he's an exciting driver to watch, especially on ovals, because he's like Connor Daly in that he will take risks on restarts. But then he just kind of became anonymous for good periods of time.
Anyway, we'll leave it there. We have discussed a lot, so thank you both for your time. That's our season reviews. We always do little categories, a little fun way of doing it, and breaking down all the main stories of the 2025 season. It's been a rather strange year, hasn't it? I think we're reflecting it is the Alex Palou year, I think, more than anything else. I always wonder, okay, in 5 years' time, someone says to me, 2025 IndyCar, Dan, what did you remember? And I think I'd be the dominance of Alex Palou more than anything else. And yeah, I mean, that was the storyline of the season. I mean, Palou's dominance was absolutely unprecedented, we spoke about. But I can't believe we're here already. It feels like we did our predictions episode a couple of months ago. And I know listeners, you'll be inquiring about that. Don't worry, we will react to our predictions some point in the coming weeks and months. We haven't forgotten it. We just want a bit more time to properly debrief them rather than rushing around in this episode. So stay tuned. It is coming. And I think that'll be a lot of fun, considering we know how some of them have aged both well and both hideously. Me and Archie will be back next week for one of my favourite episodes of the year, which is the first of our 2-part driver review, where we're going to tier list all 34 drivers who compete in the race. That was a weird thing this year, wasn't it? We didn't get a single replacement driver all year. That's a weird story, isn't it?
That was strange. Like, I feel like last year was really difficult driver tier list, because you were kind of having to judge certain drivers off about 3 races, and where do you weigh them up against the full season guys? So made our job a bit more straightforward, I guess.
Yeah, that is a strange one. Yeah, I guess there was no leader circle battle really. In fact, nobody got injured, so there's no really need to replace anybody. But yeah, that was one of the strange quirks of the year. But as I said, we'll leave it there. James, thank you for coming on again. Privileged to have you on. I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And we'll see about predictions as well, because I made some absolutely terrible ones. It wasn't a long time ago. It does feel like that though.
You've probably got the best one of the year though, so you can.
At least you didn't say McLaughlin was going to sweep the ovals.
At least I didn't say Schwartz will be rebumped. Anyway, on that bombshell, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.